Well, today our destination is the famed Big Hole River in southwest Montana. And joining me is Jim Olsen, who is the Region 3 Fisheries Biologist with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really glad you can make it. So Jim grew up in Moab, Utah. He has a bachelor's degree from Utah State University and his master's from the University of Vermont in Fish and Wildlife Management. Began his fisheries career with Montana Fish and Wildlife and Parks 17 years ago in Absaroka, Montana. Now lives in Butte as a fisheries biologist on the Big Hole River. So I think we got the right guy to talk about the Big Hole River.
That's right.
So a little bit about the Big Hole. Big Hole is one of Montana's most storied rivers, home of the last native grayling in the lower 48. Did I get that right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. And a place where trout anglers have revered the Big Hole for years and years, really for generations. It's the state's second longest free-flowing undammed river and is famous for the salmon fly hatch and probably some others, and big aggressive brown trout and grayling in the headwaters. But lately, the story seems to have changed from what I'm reading. Trout numbers are down considerably. Grayling are in trouble, and the river feels more vulnerable than ever. So, Jim, is the Big Hole at a crossroads?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. It certainly is from what's going on trout wise. We've seen a major decline in the last 6 or 8 years, particularly in brown trout, and we've kind of hit the bottom, and we've been fairly flat. So yeah, I would say it certainly is a crossroads as far as unprecedented where we've been. Even prior to the popularity of catch and release and all those sorts of things, our trout numbers are even below those population estimates we have from the late 60s and early 70s. So
really,
the numbers are down quite a bit. So
okay,
yeah.
Is this the lowest it's been since you've started recording?
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, we've improved a little bit the last couple of years, but 2 years ago, it was the lowest numbers we'd ever seen for brown trout in the river. So,
Wow. And so in talking to anglers and outfitters in the area, some people say the fishing's been fine. Is angling a good barometer of how good, the fish populations?
yeah. Yeah. Clearly not. But yeah, I mean, so low for us is like, we were around 300 brown trout a mile. And some other rivers in Montana, like the Bitterroot and the Blackfoot, that's what they are. They're about 300 fish per mile. And so
Really?
for us,
Huh.
for us, that's way lower than what we have been historically. Our average is about over 1,000 browns per mile. And so, yeah, we're pretty productive from a fishery standpoint that way. It's just, a lot lower now than what it has been. So, yeah, there's still fish to catch for sure. Just way lower than what it has been and what its potential is. So,
And when you have lower numbers like that, are you seeing some bigger trout?
some big trout.
Yeah, bigger trout because
Yeah.
the numbers are
Yeah.
lower?
Yeah, we've seen some really big trout the last couple of years. Like a big trout on the Big Hole is, over 10 pounds. It's a big. So
Really? Wow.
so yeah, yeah. So the first 10 years of my career, I saw one fish that was that size, and now we see like one every year that's that size. So
Huh.
yeah, there's some. I don't know how to catch them, but there's some big fish around. So,
How are you
yeah,
seeing them? Are you shocking them? How are you seeing
yeah,
them?
electrofishing. Yeah, yep.
Okay. Yeah, when you're shocking, are you only seeing a certain percentage of the fish? It's like only like 10 or 15%, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So to get our population numbers, we do a mark recapture population estimates. So we handle generally about 5% of the fish every time we go down the river. We go down 2 times marking the fish, and then we go down 2 times recapping the fish. And then those last 2 times we go, the proportion of fish that were marked versus those that are unmarked. That's how we tell the total number that are there. So so in all, in 4 runs through the river, we catch about 25% of the fish that are actually there.
Oh, you do? Okay. So if you're finding, a 10-pound brown trout and you're seeing 25% of the fish, there could be 3 more out there, huh?
But yeah, well, not only that is we're most efficient at catching fish that are like 12 to 17 inches. And so fish that are larger than that, we're not very good at catching. They're basically, when the electricity is in the water, they're stronger than the electricity a lot of times. And so
Okay.
they'll swim right out of the electrical current. So
Oh,
we'll see
really?
a
They
big,
get out of there.
yeah, we'll
Huh.
see a big roll or a big tail come flopping out of the water. And then that's all we'll see. So when we catch
Huh.
those big ones, we're lucky we can kind of herd them down the river and we get them into shallow water, and that's where we're able to catch them. So, but yeah,
Oh,
usually
really?
if they're in that deeper water, we see a tail or we see a roll, and that's all we see.
Huh. But you can kind of corral them if they're near shallower water then.
Right. Yeah. Yep. As we move down the river, they kind of move out in front of us, and then if we're lucky, when they try to swim by us, we're able to get them.
Are they kind of dazed a little bit or are they swimming normally?
No, they kind of swim out of control. I'll send you a video of what it looks
Yeah.
like when they're
Would you?
shocking. Yeah, because we're basically we go in a drift boat and we have an electrical generator in there and a box that turns that AC current into DC, and then the negative is on the bottom of the boat, a metal plate on the bottom, and then the positive is a metal ring on the end of a PVC pipe that we throw back and forth as we're going down the river. And so there's no electrical current in the water, and then that hits the water. A fish
Boom.
that's within 5 or 6 feet of that will react to it. And
Yeah.
then if they're close enough to it, they'll actually turn towards it, towards that positive, and then we pull that positive end back to the boat, and the fish are following it, kind of swimming out of control, but following it back to the boat. When they get up close to the boat, then we scoop them up into the boat and put them into a tank in the
Huh.
boat. Yeah. And so then we'll go a pool or so, and then we stop and then measure and weigh all those fish and let them go back in that same pool usually.
Is that involuntary that they follow the current?
Yeah, totally involuntary. Yeah, they're kind of swimming like this, but
Huh.
they will taxi in following that. Not all of them do. Some of them will break back if they get too far away from that electrode where the current's too weak. Then they'll break off and swim away.
Huh. Well,
Yeah,
a new style of fishing there. You put an
that's
electronic current in your willy bugger, drag that through a hole. Have you been surprised at what's come out of some of those holes over the years?
yeah, I mean, we see, yeah, I mean, like I said, occasionally a big fish, and the cool thing about the last few years about numbers being lower is in the past when we see a big fish, they had a massive head and fairly slender body, and that's just not the case anymore. They're thick, nice fish. So the one
Huh.
we caught this spring was, I think it was only 27 inches long, and it was over 10 pounds. It was just a
Wow.
big,
Fat.
meaty, nice fish. Yeah, yeah.
Is there just more food available because there's less trout going after it?
Oh, say that again.
Is there more food available because there's less trout going after it?
Yeah, that's what we think is, yeah, exact. Yeah, because
Huh.
that's one of the things that people have thought, especially a lot of the fishermen. They said the hatches are different and things like that, and we don't readily collect insects and that sort of thing. But that's what I tell them. I said the fish are not starving to death. That's not what our problem
That's
is.
not the
The fish
problem.
are, yeah, they're in incredibly good shape. So they're not. That's not what's going on. So yeah, that's what we think it is. Fewer fish, more food availability
More
for them.
food available. So what does a fisheries biologist do?
So, yeah, my main job is to collect data and then use that data to manage the fishery. So that's why the electrofishing part of it is us collecting the population information and then using that information then to come up with strategies either through regulations or through restoration projects and things like that that can benefit the fishery. That's my main job. I have a lot of other things that we do too,
Yeah.
involved with permitting. It's wintertime here now too, and so it's in although it's very warm today, but and has been this winter so far. But usually there's nothing for a fish guy to do in the outside this time of year, so we have a lot of reports and all that kind of thing. But
Huh.
yeah, it's in the summertime though. Once spring hits, we're pretty much out most weeks
All day.
and yeah, collecting information. We focus on the river stuff in the spring and in the fall, and then in the summertime we're doing more smaller stream work and mountain lakes and that
Huh.
sort of thing, surveying those areas. So
Interesting. Does all that summertime work cut into your fishing?
oh yeah, certainly, but the summertime days here are really long too, so
Huh.
we don't have any trouble working a 4-day work week and that sort of thing and getting all of our hours in. So yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
All right. So doing this podcast today, I'm saving you from some paperwork.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Good. Well, how'd you get so interested in, biology and conservation?
So my dad, he was a science teacher from school. So
Huh.
like, I guess I have that kind of background. He taught seventh grade science in middle school, but he's always loved to fish. And so that's kind of what got me into the fishing side of things. But growing up, I didn't even know this career existed. I had
Huh.
no idea. I lived in a small town and I ran into one game warden my entire life. And so I went to school when I started school to be an electrical engineer. And
Huh.
I had to take a natural resource class. And I said, you can get paid to do that. That's what I want to do.
Is that right?
So, yeah, so I switched into fish and wildlife and
Huh.
yeah, haven't looked back. So,
Well, how much fishing did you do as a kid?
yeah, like in Moab, there's not a lot of trout fishing.
Uh,
There's, a mountain range there. And we used to fish that quite a bit, the little creeks that come off of that. But I also did a lot of cat fishing in the Colorado River
really?
and that sort
Okay.
of thing. Yeah, we jump on our bikes and ride down to the river and, go dig worms and bring them down
Got to
and,
start
and catch
somewhere.
catch catfish and carp and that sort of thing.
And today you do some trapping?
So say that again?
Today you do some trapping?
Yeah. Yeah. My son, who's uh 15 now, 2 years ago, decided he wanted to become a trapper. So he, he,
Okay.
uh, he has a mentor that he has, and he's gotten real into it. And it's actually been kind of fun. So it's been fun to go out. It's, in Montana, there's not a lot of things to do all winter long. And that's
Yeah.
something to go out, keep you going outside and doing stuff. We're not very good at it, which
Yeah.
is fine, but it's fun to go out and do.
What are you trapping?
Primarily beavers.
Beavers.
So
Really? There's
yeah,
enough
yeah.
beavers or you can trap them?
Oh gosh, yeah, we have lots and lots of beavers. Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. He wants to make a big beaver blanket.
There you
And
go.
so that's what we've been trying to do.
You gonna
Yeah.
tan
And
the hide
we've
yourself?
yeah, yeah, he's got I think about a dozen beavers tanned up so far. And
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So he's getting pretty close to what he needs to start building it. So
That's
yeah.
cool. Beavers get big too, a lot bigger. People think they're just like the size of like an English setter or something, but they get what, 60 pounds, 100 pounds?
Yeah, the big kite. In fact, he caught the biggest one he's caught, and it was 60 pounds this fall. So that's the
Wow.
biggest one. He got one that was 56 last year, and got one that was 60 this year. So yeah,
There were some beavers that swam up to me when I was on the Provence River in Wyoming, and
yeah,
man, from a distance, I thought it was a bear. I saw this head
yeah,
sticking out of the water. I thought, "What am I looking at here?" And the thing came right up to me. I stood perfectly still, and at the last second, it went, "Oh crap!" Who is that guy? And he flipped his tail, big splash, and was gone. But the trails through the woods, were like 2 feet wide. You
yeah,
know, I mean,
yeah,
I had no idea. So I'm from
yeah.
Indianapolis. I don't know these things.
Yeah. The one cool thing about beavers too is that if you catch one and it's fresh, they're really good to eat. I was
Oh, really?
surprised. Yeah, we ate one and I was like, wow, that's tasted like pot roast. So
Huh.
we made it like pot roast and it tasted like pot roast. So
Really? Huh.
it was
Did you eat
good.
the tail? Did you eat the tail? Can't hear me.
Yeah, do it again.
Did you eat the tail?
No, no, but we've kept the tails and have tanned the tails, and
Huh.
they're really cool. They make really. In fact, my son put it on his bow. He made a handle, to go around the grip out of
Oh,
that beaver
cool.
tail. Yeah, it's really cool looking stuff. He's gonna make a knife case out of it too. So yeah.
Wow, that's cool. Lewis and Clark ate their favorite was beaver tail.
Oh,
They
say
love
that
beaver
again.
tail. Lewis and Clark, their favorite was beaver
Oh
tail.
yeah. It's just fat. Like if you take the skin
Uh,
off, it's a little piece of bone down the middle and fat, the
uh,
rest of it. So there's no
really?
muscle or anything in it. Yeah. Yep.
Huh. Interesting. Wow. Well, all right. So back to our topic here. So while we're kind of on some positives here, I'd love to hear just your thoughts around, what makes the Big Hole River, such a special fishery. So what makes the Big Hole River such a special fishery from a biological and ecological perspective?
Yeah, I mean the big hole is a cool place. I mean it's very rural and hasn't been developed all that much like a lot of rivers and things in the west, and the upper valley still, everything's all flood irrigation. And like 10 years ago they were using, you know beaver slides and all these things to put up hay and all that sort of stuff. Most people use round bales now, but So it's kind of a little bit of a step back in time, which is kind of cool. There's not a lot of, you know, rich people, fancy houses and stuff up and
Okay.
down the river, that sort of thing. So that part of it makes it pretty unique and pretty cool. And it's also a river with a lot of different character. The
Huh.
headwaters of it is this, small stream, big, wide, beautiful valley, and then it kind of gains some momentum, then goes into a canyon and gets some pretty substantial tributaries and turns into a pretty rolly, fast, more what people think of, I think, when they think of a Montana river. Um, and then it breaks out of the canyon into a wider floodplain and big cottonwood bottom and, more movement to the river. It changes every year. New channels form and new
Huh.
channels go away, or old channels go away and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, it's a cool river. It got a lot of diversity as far as water to fish and that sort of thing.
Huh.
Um, yeah, and it's a long river too, and so it can spread out a lot of a lot of people and over a long distance. It's over 100 miles long,
Cool.
and a lot of that's very fishy, and yeah, it also, I don't know, it clearly has its problems and issues like a lot of our areas do, but it's a cool, diverse fishery. Like if you want to go fish fast pocket water in a canyon, you can. If you want to go fish, braids in the lower part of the river and find your own braid that probably nobody's been on for, all summer, you can do that too.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
So it's not that crowded.
I don't know if I'd say that. It depends on the time
Okay.
of year you go. There's special rules and stuff on the river too in the summertime as far as outfitting goes. There's certain stretches where there's no outfitting every single day during the summer. And so sometimes those areas receive a little bit less pressure. But no, it's definitely, when it comes to like salmon fly time and stuff,
Yeah.
it's incredible how many people are on the river. So
Yeah, I noticed that. I fished the salmon flies in 2016, I think, and it's an army of boats heading down to the
yes.
river, and
Yeah.
our guide was like, "We gotta get out of here. I know it's a great hatch." But we did, it was early June, and we had a few, and man, those fish were looking up, and they were aggressive. Like, if you stuck a fly back under something, under some, because those flies climb out of the river, right? And they end
Right.
up on sticks and
Exactly.
rocks, and I imagine they're just dropping in there, and God, we caught some nice fish that day,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but 10
It's
years
cool.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
would have been right at the peak of our population numbers too. It was right
oh,
about
really? Huh.
2016, yeah. Yeah, 2015,
Yeah.
2016, yeah, really numbers were really high then, so, yep.
Yeah, we were staying on the Ruby River, and, it was good fishing that
Yeah.
year. Okay, I noticed it's still classified a blue ribbon trout stream. Now with all the challenges it has now, how is it still blue ribbon?
We don't regularly go back and, like, reclassify things, and
Okay.
especially, with it's you know, it was blue ribbon from, like, the late '80s to 2018.
Mhm.
And it's only this recent decline where we've seen numbers go below what we would call a blue ribbon stream. And we believe this is not a permanent thing, that we're going to rebound. There's no reason to suggest, to think that whatever's happened now, once we get into good water conditions, that's kind of what we think was happened. We're not sure if something happened, if there was some sort of disease or something like that, or just the conditions were right for whatever reason that we saw the high mortality rates that we saw for 3 or 4 consecutive years. And then since then, we've been in a deep drought. And so river flows have been really low and really warm. And historically, that means very few juvenile fish. And so we've been kind of in this depressed state. And then where we got into this depressed state and we just haven't been able to climb out of it because we haven't had any good water. But in a really
Huh.
good water year, a couple of good water years in a row can really change the outlook for the river. It can, the
Yeah.
numbers can increase really, really quickly.
So there are some bright spots.
Oh, yeah. So 2 years ago, we had an average water year and we almost doubled the population. So that's what all we need is, it seems to be so far, is good water to give us a chance for those little fish to survive. Everything in Montana is wild. It's all wild fisheries. So we don't stock any of the rivers. So
Mhm.
every year it seems like those juvenile fish are being produced. Just in those really poor water years, they all get stuck together and we have really poor survival of those little fish. So every year they're there. But when we have really good water, there's lots, the edges of the river are wet all the way out. The fish aren't concentrated and those little fish survive really, really well. And so when they survive really, really well, we can double the population in a year.
Really?
Yeah.
But what gets the little fish? Predation or?
That's what we assume. We don't know that for sure, but that's what we assume is it's predation, either, brown trout eating them or even just other predators. But that's an assumption. We don't know that for sure, but that's kind of what we assume.
You assume that. Interesting. Well, I read an article. You might have seen this in the Daily Montanan. Do you read that magazine?
The daily what?
Montanan.
Oh, huh.
Okay. Said this is what it said. The Big Hole has been chronically dewatered by over appropriated irrigation withdrawals for decades. Combine that with declining precipitation, increasing temperatures of climate change from human caused atmospheric pollution, and the river's low flows and high water temperature woes were magnified to such an extent that the river was partially or fully closed to fishing for much of the summer. Would you agree with what they're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's true. It's um, the the river is what's called over allocated. So there are more water rights on the river than there is water available. And
Whoops.
so, yeah, yeah. Well, that's just a relic of
Yeah.
that's what settled the valley. That's what settled this
Hmm.
country was agriculture, right? And so
Hmm.
that's still what the livelihood of a lot of people are up and down the valley is they depend on that water for growing hay, which they need to then feed their cows all winter long because nothing grows in Montana in the wintertime. And so if you don't have that hay, your cows got to go somewhere else. And so that's what that water is used for. And that's the fact of Montana water law that it's over appropriated. There's more water rights than there is water available. The reason there is water in the river is because those guys work together to not dry it up. But really it could be completely dry. In fact, back in the late 80s, it went completely dry up near the upper part of the river. It was dry for 30 days. There's no water whatsoever
Huh.
in the river.
They dewatered then, like the rancher's pulling water out.
Yeah. Yep.
Just gone.
Yeah. It's gone. Yep.
So
Yeah.
Jim, how does that work then? Because imagine that part of your job is probably talking to ranchers and conservation districts and things like that. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a big part of my job is working together with those guys to make sure that it doesn't go dry. They don't want it to go dry.
Yeah.
Agriculture is a big part of, that's or water is a big part of their business. If they don't have it, they go out of business. But they also are good stewards of the land for the most part. They want to do things that are good, and they don't want to. They understand that fishing is an important part of the community as well. They don't want the river to go dry, so they do. They do a lot. They do give up a lot, particularly in these really dry years like last year and 2 years before. They give up a lot of their profits to make sure that water stays in the river.
So they have to volunteer to do that.
That's completely voluntary. There's no enforcement whatsoever on water rights. That's the DNRC. It's one of our sister agencies, state agencies here. They handle all of the water rights, but
Uh-huh.
there's no enforcement. It's them working together with each other and with us to make sure that water stays in the river.
So the anglers will never be first for water rights. It just doesn't work that way.
No, not under current water policy. That's not the case. Like we have Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has a in-stream flow right in almost all of our rivers, but our priority date is 1980. And so in Montana, it's first in time, first in right. So whenever you started using that water, that is your priority date. And if you are the first one, and most of these are like late 1800 water rights, then
Hmm.
you have priority before I do, who just has a 1980 water right. So if there's enough water to make both of us happy, that's fine. But when the water gets low, the guy who has the older water right has all of the say. He can say,
Eh,
I need all of my water, and then I have to stop. And so
really?
we have some water rights, but they don't mean a whole lot because there's so many rights that are senior to us.
What is beneficial use mean?
Beneficial. So water has to be applied. So in order to use water in Montana, it has to be used for an approved beneficial use. And so like agriculture,
Yeah.
fish and wildlife is actually a use. And so like
Hmm.
people have private ponds and things like that. They have to have a water right for that pond that it has a fish and wildlife right with it. So that's what it is. You can't take it out lawn and garden municipal use, that sort of thing. You can't divert the stream or make your own channel of the river and have the river flow through it and go back. You can't do that because that's not a beneficial use.
Okay. Huh. Interesting. So you were talking about some die-offs and whatnot earlier. I might not be using the right term, but is disease part of the problem as well, or is that still undetermined?
It's We certainly know that initially it was a problem because we had fish dying. Like in 2014 and 2015, we had significant fish die-offs, like post-spawn brown trout die-offs in the fall, where there were hundreds of dead fish around.
Huh.
Um, and then, we thought at the time we were also at the highest densities of fish. We were over 2,000 fish a mile, so really high densities. We had a really warm fall, and we thought at the time that that was just a result of like too many fish. They were in poor condition going into spawning season, and they started dying. But then after that, that's when our major decline started to show up too. So it may have been something else that we weren't seeing, that we didn't know about. So it's certainly one of the things we've suspected occurred. There's no other reason, like environmentally, that we would suspect to see the declines that we've had, because we've had dry times before,
Yeah.
and our populations do shrink during drought periods. But what we saw is this decline was happening like in 2016 when you were here. Those were good water years. 2016, 2017, 2018, those were
Mm.
decent water years.
Hmm.
And at the time we had decent water, our fish were declining, and that wasn't making any sense to us,
Yeah.
which is why we started looking a little closer at disease. And then we also started to see some things that we had never seen before on fish. They had these head lesions like right behind the eyes, where there'd be like looks like a bald spot, but then that is actually eating down into the skin and into the bone and that sort
Huh.
of thing. We'd never seen that before either. And so there were just things that came up that way, and we've since really looked hard in the last 3 years at disease and taken a lot of samples and looked at them really close, and there just hasn't been a smoking gun.
Huh.
And also the prevalence of, if it was disease, seems to have declined significantly. Like the last 3 springs, we've been looking at every single fish that we handle for disease, which is thousands of fish, and we're less than 1% show any sign of disease whatsoever. So it may have been
Huh.
something that if it was here has kind of run its course. I don't know. Our disease
Yeah.
experts are kind of stumped too, because we might have missed our window to look really close at it. We're at the tail end of things, and so finding specimens that are really good for them to look at and clinically analyze has been difficult.
Is that the Michigan, or sorry, the Montana State University study you're doing?
Yeah, we have folks from there's not very many people in the country that do this stuff. West Virginia, Washington, and then several folks from Montana, fish health wise, that are helping us try to figure that end of things out.
And how does that research, like, how do you actually do that? Does that start with electroshocking and getting sample fit? Okay.
Yeah, both that, and then the last couple of years we've used anglers too,
Huh.
where we have a guy on our staff, and all the outfitters have his number, and if they see a fish or catch a fish that is sick in any sort of way, they call him, and they can either hold that fish with them or they can put it in a net or something. Like, he'll come out and get that fish. The problem has been we need a live specimen. If they've been dead for more than 5 or 10 minutes, that
Oh.
it doesn't do the histologist any good to get a fish that's that way. They need to have their tissues fixed in a fixative, within 15 minutes of death, for them to have a good chance of, looking at those specimens and diagnosing what's going on.
Huh. And how are the Arctic grayling doing?
The grayling are doing fairly well, a
Huh.
lot better than the trout are, from a sense of, we have a big program focused on restoration in the upper watershed, which is where the grayling primarily are. And over the past 15 years, they've really improved. They've shrunk a
Huh.
little bit during this dry time, but shrunk, which is what we would expect, similar to what they've done in past droughts. So numbers have declined a little bit, but not that much. And they've done fairly. They're doing pretty well, actually.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah,
And give me a sense, like if I go grayling fishing, how's public access? Like how do I go about that?
to catch grayling specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm going after grayling, what am I doing?
Uh, you want to fish with a dry fly, and because they are very surface oriented, and you want to
Hmm.
be focused on areas in the middle to the upper part of the river. And so upstream of Wise River, which is one of the major tributaries, that's where most of the grayling are. We've caught grayling all the way down to the confluence with the Beaverhead, but
Huh.
not very many. So
Yeah.
they are there, just not very many. And focused on early summertime, and you're looking for areas with some deeper water. If there's some deeper water there or bigger pools, there's not a whole lot of pools in that reach of the river. And if you can find those areas, and there's a really good trico hatch on the big hole,
Uh,
and
huh.
when that happens, there's a lot of fish on the surface. So it's really hard to distinguish between a whitefish and a trout or a grayling, but there's a lot of fish feeding on the surface.
Are they pretty easy to catch? I've heard that, you can have some big numbers.
What's that?
Are they pretty easy to catch? I've heard you can have some pretty
Yeah.
big days.
Yeah, they're very easy to catch. They're just not very common. And
Oh.
so it's not like there's grayling everywhere. If you catch 2 grayling in a day, that's a great day.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've caught maybe 5 grayling total on the big hole, but
Oh, okay.
I don't try to go catch grayling either. So more
Yeah.
focused on some other things. But if you try to catch grayling, most people who try to catch grayling, if they're willing to put in a day or two, they can find a grayling to
They
catch.
can't. Okay. So you're gonna be catching a lot of trout, and you just know there's gonna be some grayling here at some point then.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. That's what I
Huh.
say. And if you focus too on fishing on the surface too, you'll have a lot better chance of catching a grayling.
How is public access on the big hole in general and up in the grayling area?
Yeah, access is pretty good. There's not very many stretches where there's, 3 or 4 miles before there isn't some sort of public access, either through a fishing access site, one of ours, or the BLM has several fishing access sites up and down the river too. So, and of course, in Montana, they have the stream access law. So once you gain access to the
Yeah.
river, you can go up and down the river as long as you stay within the high water mark and fish wherever you want.
Yeah.
Most
Love that.
people float the river. So once you get put in, it's just how long you want to float, and flows at different times of the year help dictate that as well. In the springtime through June, you can float a pretty long stretch of the river if you want to, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
water and it's moving fast.
Huh.
And it can be kind of dangerous to wade fish that time of year too. So, but then
Okay.
later in the summer, there's a whole mix of what people do. Float between floating and wade fishing too.
Huh. So what are flows CFS wise in different sections of the river, say in the spring after runoff? What can I expect?
Yeah, like usually you can float the river pretty easily down to about 300 CFS. And so, our spring runoff, it is typically in that like 4 to 7,000 CFS sort of
Okay.
range. The
Yeah.
cool thing about the big hole too is short of like early spring runoff, it doesn't get muddy. And so
Really?
even during peak runoff, it's usually clear enough to fish.
'Cause
And
there's not a
so
lot of ag? There's not a lot of,
yeah,
like
I think it's a lot of it has to do with our geology. We have a very heavily granite sort of geology, and
huh.
just doesn't produce the silts and the very fine sediments that you get in more sedimentary geology. And we have a very big, we have a lot of agriculture and that sort of thing in the drainage, but it's the streams, the tributaries, a lot of those sorts of things are in pretty good shape too. So we don't have
Huh.
big sources of sediment to come into the river that ever really make it muddy. Really, when it gets really dark colored is our first initial snow melt, like in
Yeah.
April and early May, when the low elevation snow kind of comes off of that ag land, and it turns a really deep tea colored. But it'll be, visibility be less than like 6 inches, and it gets pretty tough to fish. Then you can still fish it, but it gets pretty tough. But most
Huh.
of the time, that's it. And then after that, even when the water gets high, it's very much easy to, no, I should say easy, but clear enough to fish and have a good fishing day.
I like a little color to the water,
I do too. Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
You can sneak up on them a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times that's, with the higher water, that's usually like that's the best time of year to fish, because the fish move out to the edges. They don't want to
Mm.
be out in that big heavy current. And so they're right along the edges, and it makes it easier to target them because They don't. There's not many places for them to hide, even though there's a lot of water in the river. They tend to move out towards the edges and into side channels and things like that, where they're a lot more, a lot more vulnerable to us to fish. And
Yeah.
so those medium flows, like under 1,000 CFS, I think it's actually tougher to fish a lot of times that because the fish can be anywhere in the river.
Oh, interesting. Is it wooded the whole way? Or I imagine that there's areas where it's not, but
Yeah, when you get upstream, like Wise River is one of the main tributaries to the river. When you get upstream of that point, there's really not. It's willows along the edge of the river for the most part,
okay.
and there are a few cottonwoods, and there are a few stretches where there's like pine trees close to the river. But otherwise, it's kind of a big, wide, willowy bottom.
Huh.
And then, yeah, you get down into the canyon and then below that point, then it's more cottonwoods, big cottonwood bottoms and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's
Huh.
never like pine trees and that sort
Okay.
of a river.
Like the Gallatin, maybe, not quite like
Right,
that.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, like the Gallatin or some street stretches of the Blackfoot and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Is it kinda open like, like the Madison is open most of it?
As far as like open to fishing or
Yeah, just like the open country, I can kinda see for miles, I can see the whole valley while I'm fishing, that
yeah,
kinda thing?
depends on where you're at. So, like, through the canyon you reach, so, like, from Wise River downstream to the town of Glen, you're kind of in a canyon. You're in pretty tight
Oh, you
quarters,
are? Okay.
and yeah. Yep, yeah, and then upstream of that, the valley does open up quite a bit, and you get up to the upper part of the watershed where the stream the river's more of a stream. That's a beautiful spot. It's a big, wide valley,
Huh.
willow bottom, meandering stream through it, and it's really, really pretty up there.
That sounds beautiful. What are the major hatches? Obviously, salmon flies, green drakes. What else have you guys got?
Yeah, we have a really good Mother's Day caddisfly hatch. That's usually our first hatch on the river. Around Mother's Day, depends on,
Good
it's the
name.
first. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's usually the first 2 or 3 70-degree days we have in May. And then that's when those bugs go. And that's a big hatch. It's very prolific. The problem
Huh.
is it happens usually in a time when the water's like the most turbid. You can't see as
Really?
good. But
Okay.
it's, it's one of those hatches where your windshield will be covered in bugs,
Really?
driving up and down
Huh.
the river. Yeah, it's a really prolific hatch. And then, yeah, then usually a kind of a lull there, and then salmon flies are usually that first 2 weeks in June.
Yeah.
And then from there on, it's like a sporadic, there's lots of stuff going on bug wise. There's always caddisflies hatching, yellow sallies, little yellow stones. That's one of my
Yeah.
favorite little hatches. That's one that a
Huh.
lot of people don't fish, but I really like to fish those little yellow sallies. And then we have a lot of golden stones and that sort of thing too, that there's no like, hatch like but they're always hatching. And so there's always,
Really?
those bugs are around and that sort of thing. And then we have a really good trico hatch in July and August. That could,
Does that go on for a while?
what's that?
Does that go on? The trico hatch goes on for a
Yeah,
while?
it does go on for a while, and you can follow it up and down the river, depending on how the day goes, and it's a fun hatch too because, you get the bugs coming off in the morning, and there'll just be clouds of them over the river, and then when that
Yeah.
spinner fall hits, it looks like the river's boiling because there's so many fish that are,
Really?
yeah, there's a lot of whitefish, in the big hole.
Yep.
There's as many whitefish as there are
Mhm.
trout, and more so now even, and so and like when those tricos fall, there's every fish in the river is trying to slurp them up. So it kind of tests you a little bit as far as, if you're trying to pick out a trout, to pick out a trout's nose versus a whitefish's nose coming up out of the water. But it's,
Yeah.
whitefish are fun to catch too.
Are you able to catch a whitefish on a trico on the surface like that?
Oh, say that again.
Are you able to catch a whitefish on the surface with a dry fly like that?
When with tricos, you mean, or
Yeah, with tricos, yeah.
yeah,
Can you get whitefish?
oh, yeah, you can get whitefish. You get a lot of misses because that their mouth is so small,
Wrong
and
spot. Yeah, it's
yeah,
down here.
exactly. Yep, yep. So you get a lot of misses, and so which is fun too. I don't know. That's whenever you can get a fish to eat something off the surface, it's fun. And so,
Huh.
but you'll miss a trout 1 in 10 times, and it's the opposite for whitefish. You'll miss 10 rises on a whitefish
God,
before you
no
get one
kidding.
that actually gets the fly in its mouth and you get to hook it.
It's so interesting you say that. I was on the Upper Green a couple years ago and fish feeding like crazy in the evening, and I could not catch any of them. It was driving me. I was putting bugs right over. They're coming up and hitting it, and somebody later said, "Those were whitefish. That's why you weren't catching them."
Yep. Yep.
you know?
Yeah. They just have, their mouth is just so small.
Yeah.
Their mouth is designed, whatever you want. It's adapted to root around in the rocks
Yeah, the
in that,
bottom.
yeah, and suck up insects in those little gaps. And so,
Yeah.
but when the bugs are so prolific, they'll try to be on a surface feeder. They're just
Right.
not. They're just that little mouth. It's hard for them to get something sucked down into it.
Now, all those stonefly hatches you were talking about, are those all, like, daytime, morning hatches? When are you seeing those?
Yeah, like I said, the caddisflies will go all day. The Mother's Day, like the Tricos are the ones that seem to be like they're ones that, and a lot of them are that way where they'll hatch out in the morning,
Mhm.
and then there'll be a spinner fall in the evening. But the Tricos, yeah, like 11 o'clock in the morning, that's when they're hatching out, and then like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon is when the spinner fall happens. So,
Okay.
yeah,
That's
so
Tricos. What about earlier in the spring with all the stoneflies you've got?
we have a like early in the spring, like the first hatch that comes off are the squallas, and we have a not a ton of squallas, but we have some squallas, and that's usually like early April. And so the fish haven't been pressured, especially now the river's closed all winter, and so it opens April 1st. And so for some reason those fish just they like to hit dry flies, and I don't know if it's because of the squallas or not. I don't know, but a big poofy dry fly in the springtime when there's nothing else hatching
Yeah.
sometimes can work pretty good.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So Jim, what flies are you carrying in your box? Say, when, you've got green drakes and salmon flies and whatnot. Obviously, you got salmon flies. What are your favorite patterns?
I tie my own stuff, so it doesn't
Oh,
have a
okay.
name. I don't know. I
Jim's
tend to
custom flies.
right, yeah, just I know somebody else has a name kind of for it, but I like extended body stuff, foam stuff.
Okay.
I tend to tie smaller than what the real bugs are, a little
How come?
sparser,
Yeah,
just
why?
'cause I don't know if they I just I don't know. I don't know if it works
Easier to
any better.
throw.
Yeah,
Yeah.
easier to throw, doesn't I don't know. I don't know if it works any better than anything else
You think
really,
just
but
something a little different, if with all these anglers pounding away, might help?
yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
Huh.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
What's your little Sally pattern? Have you got anything you like there?
Same thing. It's just my own. I tie it with like a tan calf tail wing, and it's like a 14 or 12 or a
Yep.
14, so fairly small, and the calf tail wing floats good enough that I can put a little dropper underneath it or something like that too. So,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
What's your
it's
what's your typical setup? You like the dry dropper setup mostly?
I do like to do that once things are happening in June. Before June, though, I'm primarily nymph fishing, and then there could be some really and that stuff, early May or mid May till the salmon flies pop is and before that, primarily my go to fly before that's a San Juan worm,
Is that
and
right? Okay.
yeah, before the bugs start hatching, it's just a really productive fly.
What's your San Juan worm look like? What color are you using?
I use a bubble gum, like pink one
Oh, you do?
primarily.
Okay.
That or wine. Wine color is my second.
Wine too, okay.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, they used to tie them with a little like a bead in the middle, and, like, you'd have, like, a kind of a brownish on one end and a red tail on the other, a bead and some peacock herald in the middle. I haven't seen those in years, but we actually did really well. I remember we fished Rock Creek one year, and we did really well
Yeah.
on that pattern.
Yeah. Early
It's almost
season,
cheating.
that's yeah, exactly. I don't have anything fancy for my worms, but
Huh.
sometimes either a glass bead or just a metal bead on it. But I fished those new squirmy worms, the
Yep.
rubbery kind
Yeah.
too, and they're just more durable. I don't think they fish any better. They just
Oh, the
fish
squirmies are more
longer.
durable? Okay.
Yeah, 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 they just fish longer than the
Huh.
yarn ones, so
Interesting.
a a turd and a worm, that's, like, one of the most popular, outfits for
Turd
when
and a
the fish.
worm?
Yeah, that's just like a Pat's rubber leg
Okay.
and then a sand
Gotcha.
worm. Yeah, everybody calls it a turd and a worm, so,
Dredging the
um,
bottom. Are you Eurofishing a lot?
I've just started, like, the last 2 years.
Okay.
I got a setup for it, and I've been playing with it a little bit, and
Yeah, what do you think?
it's fun. I like it. It's really effective on whitefish,
Yeah.
but it's been fun. Like in times where fishing has been really tough in other ways that I've been able to still catch fish doing that. But then there's been times too where I said, "This is stupid. I don't know why I'm doing this. I can't catch a fish."
Right?
So Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I just try to stick to things longer than I probably should.
Huh.
Trying to, yeah. But like I
What
said, it's new for me, so I'm learning.
are you doing, some Paragon flies, or what do you like for Euro?
Salmon flies?
Just what kind of nymphs are you throwing with your Euro rod?
Yeah, so I use a worm pattern
Do
with
you?
it as
Okay.
well. Yeah, and then usually, some sort of, whatever above that, Euro nymphs. I don't know what you say they actually imitate or whatever, because a lot of them don't imitate anything. And
Yeah.
then I have a couple of like woolly bugger type ones that I've used too that I've caught fish on. At least I don't want to say they're effective, but I've caught fish on them.
Yeah.
And that's one of oh, go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
I was gonna say my favorite way to fish on the big hole is to throw streamers. That's what I that's it's fun.
Huh.
And just to have the right water conditions. It's usually when the water's a little bit higher, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, so what are your go-to streamer patterns?
My favorite fly is a yellow sex dungeon,
Okay.
and one of those articulated,
Yeah.
Kelly Gallup sort of thing. It moves good, looks cool in the water, but the main reason I like it is I can always see that yellow head. And
Oh,
so as you're stripping it, you know exactly where it is. And so you get to watch the fish come out and whack it. That's my
yeah.
favorite part. Or even sometimes when they don't whack it, they just swipe at it or they come follow it. That's the part I
Huh.
like. It's fun. Yeah.
What X, tippets are you
Oh,
using on
zero.
streamers?
Yeah.
0? Really?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah. The
Huh.
fish, they don't care about any of that sort of stuff. And I'm not a great caster sometimes, and there's a lot of other stuff in the river to hook onto. So if I hook onto it, I just want to put my pole right at as you're floating by, and I'm either going to rip
Yank.
whatever it is out of the bank, or I'm going to straighten the hook out. So
How are you doing on willow bushes?
yeah, well, I catch lots of those for
Yeah, I
sure.
don't do very good on a willow bush. I find
Yeah,
I almost always lose my fly if it's in a
yeah,
willow bush, you
yeah.
know?
Either I straighten my hook out, or yeah. Whatever. So yeah.
So, like on a yellow Sally, what X are you going down to for that?
For what?
For a yellow Sally, what X are you using for that?
Yeah, I mean, like 5X.
Oh, okay.
I never fish 6. I don't even have any
Yeah.
of that sort of stuff. And so like 4 is what my go-to for lighter stuff, that sort of thing.
Okay.
I don't personally, I don't think fish are that leader shy as we all make them out to be. But at
Yeah.
least the fish in the big hole seem to be that way. So it's more of your tolerance for losing flies, either through hooking them into bad stuff or on a fish or whatever. So I usually fish pretty heavy.
Or losing big fish. It's hard to get a big fish in. I know all you Euro guys out there with those super flimsy Euro rods, those, three-way Euro rods are using 6, but and I have not mastered that yet. I like a Rex if I know there's some big fish out there.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like that little stuff because and I don't know if it comes from my bait fishing days early on, but I have a very mean hook set.
Oh,
So
do you? Okay.
if I lose a lot of flies if I do those light tippets and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
You gotta make those eyeballs go cross-eyed.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the story on the closures? Like, do you make the call personally, or how does that come about on whether to close a
So
river?
Yeah, so we have 2 types of closures that happen on the big hole. Right now, we have a management plan spelled out that based on where we're at fish numbers wise, that helps us or gives us direction on what kind of regulations we should have on the river. And right now, because since our population numbers are really low, we have a spawning closure on the river. So the river's closed to all fishing from October 1st to April 1st. And that's to
Okay.
protect brown trout. And so brown trout
Yeah.
are spawning in the fall, but then their eggs are incubating all winter in the gravel. And so it's really easy to tell where they're spawning in the fall. But after a month after they're done, there's algae on top of their nests and stuff. So you can't tell where their nests are anymore. And so we're trying to protect them from trampling as well. And so that's
Mhm.
in place right now. And that's as a result of low numbers. And then we also have drought related closures that can happen on the river. And so we have we've worked with the Big Hole Watershed Committee to make a drought management plan. And so that drought management plan has specific triggers in it that tell us at what flows and what temperatures we would enact a closure. So if the river's 73 degrees for 3 consecutive days, we put into effect what are called hoot owl
Hmm.
closures. And so the
Yeah.
river is closed to fishing from 2 p.m. till midnight. And then we
Mm.
also have closures that are flow related. So if the river gets below, for the majority of the river, the lower part of the river, below 150 CFS, then we close it to fishing. And yeah, so the reason is usually when it's that low, it's also really warm too. And so there's already been a hoot owl in place. And so when it gets that low, the fish get really concentrated. So a lot of the areas that a fish could be in before when there's good water don't exist anymore. They're dry now. And so the fish get
Uh,
concentrated into a much smaller area. So they're easier to target. But really the other reason for that is at the same time, we're asking ranchers to give up water, right? To not take their full allotment of water, to leave water in the river. And at that same time, it's what we call a shared sacrifice model. So we're asking ranchers to give up that. And so we're asking fishermen to also give up fishing during that time.
yeah.
And
Makes
so
sense.
that's that's the yeah, that's the main reason behind it is this idea of a shared sacrifice model where everybody gives up some to benefit the fish overall. And
Yeah.
it's a fair way for not just the normal angler, but also commercial folks who are also making their money off of the water in the river to be giving up some at that same time. So
Okay. Huh. How are some of the other rivers in the area doing, like the Beaverhead, the Jefferson, Ruby, Clark Fork, those kind of things?
yeah, the Beaverhead has experienced very similar declines during the same time as the Big Hole. It's recovered a lot more than the Big Hole has, particularly
Huh.
in the section below Clark Canyon Dam. The numbers there are doing very, very well. And farther
Oh, really?
downstream towards
Huh.
Dillon, yeah, yeah, the
Yeah.
they've improved as well. The Beaverhead though is, it's a different cat than the Big Hole. It's incredibly productive. And it's a third the size of the Big Hole, but it has, 3 times the fish as the Big Hole, and they
Wait, the
grow,
Beaverhead,
twice as fast.
how is the Beaverhead the third the size of the Big Hole? The Big Hole flows into the Beaverhead. Am I right about that?
Yeah, so when they come together, they make the Jefferson. So when the Big Hole and the Beaverhead meet, that
Oh,
they make the
okay. All
Jefferson.
right. So if
And so
that's how the Jefferson, okay, gotcha.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
so it is smaller than but it has a dam on it, and so the flows in there are, often way higher than what the Big Hole is in the summertime because they're releasing water for irrigation
Huh.
downstream, down by Dillon. And so there'll be actually more water in the Beaverhead in the summertime. But as far as like if they were free flowing rivers, the Big Hole is definitely bigger than the Beaverhead. But the Beaverhead drains a different geology, a lot more sedimentary
Hmm.
kind of rock, and so it's incredibly productive. And
Huh. Interesting.
yeah, yeah,
Are you a history buff by chance? Have you kind of looked at some of the history of this area?
as far as I mean,
Oh, like
I
Lewis
like
and Clark,
history. Yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah,
just
yeah. Lewis and Clark came
l
through. Yeah,
yeah, it's fascinating. They
yeah.
saw that
Lewis
big Beaverhead thing.
Yeah. Yep. Lewis and Clark named the Big Hole the Wisdom River. So wisdom and the Beaverhead is wisdom, philanthropy, and some other. I can't remember what their
Really?
other names were,
I
but
didn't
yeah,
know that.
it was first named the Wisdom River, and
Huh.
so there's a town of Wisdom on there, and then there's
Yeah.
Wise River, one of its main tributaries. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so
Okay.
when they hit the confluence of the Big Hole, they scouted the Big Hole, and the Big Hole is more rolly and rough and steeper riffles, and the Beaverhead was like, well, they're gonna stick with the Beaverhead.
They stuck with
On
the
the way up, is
Beaverhead.
much easier to go up. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there Lewis and Clark, like, campsites that you can go to in the area?
Yeah, yeah, there is. There's Clark's Lookout, a state park right in Dillon, where they got up on top of a rock, and then we're looking upstream and downstream, and then farther upstream, actually, it's underwater now in under Canyon Ferry, or not Canyon Ferry, excuse me, Clark Canyon Reservoir. Is They have their camps and that sort of thing all defined there, and but
Oh,
it's
really?
all underwater. Yep, yep,
Huh.
yeah.
Interesting. That's fascinating. So what are the biggest misconceptions people have about the big hole anglers have about the big hole right now?
I think one of the biggest ones is because so much of we got a lot of press three years
Right.
ago or so, 3 or 4 years ago, and New York Times, it appeared in the New York Times, and this whole idea of zombie fish. I don't know if you've heard that term, but it drives
No,
me
I haven't heard
nuts. I
that.
hate when people, yeah. So it's these fish that you see it in Alaska all the time. As a fish is spawned and it's just sitting there waiting to die. It's covered in fungus in it, but it's still alive. And so we, at
Huh.
one time we had fish like that in the big hole, that were covered in that fungus, and that's what really got a lot of press and got people excited. And the notion kind of was that the big hole is full of these fish that are, looks like Alaska when all the fish are dying. And that's not what the case is. And like I
That's
said,
not
it's
happening.
fewer than one. Yeah, fewer than 1% of the fish now are like, have any sign of disease whatsoever. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions is that that the rivers in, there's just dead fish all over, and and because we've had such a significant decline, that fishing would be no good. And like you said, fishing's not no good. That's not what the case is. And the fish are really nice in the river. 300 fish a mile anywhere else is a decent, a good population of fish. And so
Huh.
it's not like there's no fish to catch. It's just not,
Yeah.
it's not up to its potential. There's a lot more potential there for
Yeah.
getting back up to where it used to be.
What's your what do you suspect? Where do you suspect you'll end up in terms of finding the answer? I guess it sounds like you're doing research. There's still some questions, some unknowns. What's your hunch? Like, what do you think the answer is going to be here to turn this around?
The real answer is water. Um,
Hmm.
and being able to get water in the river. And the Big Hole's a freestone river. There's no dam on it. So it's
Hmm.
100% dependent on precipitation. And so when the water's good and we're in cycles, we tend to be in cycles. And it seems to be more recently, when the Big Hole is kind of cool. We have over 100 years of flow data from the Big Hole. So the
Hmm.
first gauge went
Hmm.
in 1920. And so now we have 100 years of flow information. And when you look back through
Yeah.
that 100 years, we've had dry times in the past, but what's happened in the last 30 years is the dry times before would be 1 or 2 years in a row. Now they're 5 or 6 years in a row. And so we had a drought. We
Oh.
had a drought in the early 2000s from 2001 through 2006. And now we're in the same sort of pattern now from like 2019 to the present. We're just having consistently bad water years in a row. And that seems to be what our analysis we're looking at, pretty big, doing a lot of research is showing is that having consecutive dry years in a row is what really hurts our fish population because we don't get
Hmm.
any significant recruitment or survival of those little fish growing up to be big enough to where we can catch them and they can get big enough to reproduce. So that seems to be one of our biggest problem is water. And so
Yeah.
I don't, we're not going to make it, I have no control over, how much precipitation we get. And so, but we're looking at other ways to potentially improve flows. Ideally, we could have some sort of storage reservoir or something like that where we could release that water and have that water
Mm.
be protected, have that water be for fish. And so that couldn't be taken for other uses. And
Yeah.
if we could do that, that would be a huge benefit to our fish because our analysis right now shows that flow and temperature are the two most important things controlling the fishery, and that also controls its recovery. And so, also with improved flows comes better temperature as well. So, we are
Yeah.
working on some other projects though that are directly helping temperature. A lot of our tributary streams that come in are really cold. They come straight out of the mountains and are ice cold.
Yeah.
But then, right before they hit the Big Hole River, right where they come in, they're diverted down an irrigation ditch. And so we're working on a couple projects right now to actually change how that irrigation water is used, have them pull more water out of the Big Hole River, but then let that tributary go all the way
Yeah.
in and
Right.
reach the river. So we're
Okay.
taking 70-degree out water out of the river and putting in 55-degree water from that
Yeah.
tributary. So
Is that
yeah,
expensive? You got to rechannel things.
yeah, so it is because we have to we're piping the ditch underneath the creek now. So that one project, I think is $220,000 to put one ditch under one creek. So
One project. Oh my gosh. So that's
Yeah,
a tough one. How would the stored water work? How would you do that?
yeah, we'd have to have like a reservoir on a tributary stream.
Hmm.
There's examples
Hmm.
of that in Montana. Painted Rocks Reservoir is the one that everybody points to on the Bitterroot, and our agency has a water right out of that dam, and so we're able to let water out of the dam just for fish. And so that doesn't get
Huh.
used for irrigation or whatever. It goes down that tributary and into the Bitterroot River, and that helps to augment flows and temperature in the river. Something like
Yeah.
that in the big hole could be incredibly beneficial for both flow and temperature.
Has that come up in these conservation meetings that I'm sure you've gone to?
Yeah, it has, but there's, you know, we're kind of in the era of taking down dams and getting
Yeah.
rid of those sorts of things. And so it's pretty novel, and it's not something um, that would happen tomorrow, because we probably
Yeah.
also need a
Right.
way to protect that water. Um,
Mhm.
because if it's there in the river, it's there for anybody to take, and who has a water right. And so we would need some sort of means to be able to protect that water once it's in the
Legislation.
river too. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Yep.
And somebody'd have to donate a bunch of land for a reservoir.
Right. In our neck of the woods, that would probably have to happen on federal ground. Because most of our tributary
Right.
streams are on national forest, and so
Okay.
it would
Yeah.
probably have to happen there.
Huh. So so Jim, especially these years of drought, 4, 5, 6 years of drought, what keeps you going? What motivates you? That's gotta be kinda depressing to get up and go work when you're facing that.
Yeah, it is. It's tough, but it's not like we haven't been through a drought before.
Uh-huh.
Every other drought that we've been to, once the conditions improved, the fish also responded. And so that's what gives
Yeah.
me hope. It's like we're just trying to get through it. And it's harder when it happens every year, every year, and then you don't get much of a break from it. But like I said, we had that 1 year, 2 years ago that was just an average year. It wasn't a higher water year. It was just an
Mhm.
average year, and we doubled the fish population. So,
Yeah.
that's what gives me hope. It's like what we're focused on now is, and it's kind of good in a sense, is that when numbers are low and we keep getting these, there is a continued emphasis to get these projects done that benefit the river. When the river's high and everything's good, there's not as much attention to it,
Yeah. Huh. Hadn't thought of that.
so we're not able to get, so I hate to say it, like, these things are good. They're not good. We don't want, drought and that sort of thing, but it does it does help us stay focused and helps keep others engaged in the projects that we want to do. All these projects happen on private property, and so we need people who
Mhm.
are willing to work with us to do these sorts of things. And all of the water rights are privately owned water rights. It's their part of
Mhm.
their private property right, and so we have to have engagement from them and cooperation to make any of these projects work.
And how's that going? It sounds like it's going okay.
It is going pretty good. We have our demographic of people is changing too. As you can't buy a ranch on the big hole and make a living with agriculture. You can't do that anymore
Mhm.
because the land values
Hmm.
are so high. The people who do agriculture are families. They're passing that down to their kids and that sort of thing. But
Okay.
the people who are buying these ranches are buying them for recreational properties. And that's
Yeah.
what's shot the cost of them through the roof. And so we work with whoever is willing to work with us. And in a lot of cases, in some of the cases, at least, the new demographic of people who move in are, they're not focused on growing hay as much, and they want to do good things for fish. And so it's presented some good opportunities to work with those folks to try to, you know, change, tweak their operations a little bit so that what's happening can benefit fish more.
Yeah. So how important is it to state of Montana, particularly Southwest Montana, to get these problems addressed with the Big Hole and some of the other rivers in the area?
I wish I had the numbers. They just came out with a recreational study, an economic recreational study, and I can't remember how many billions of dollars are spent on trout fishing in Montana. But it's the number two industry after agriculture is
Oh, is it?
tourism in our state,
Really?
and so
Huh.
And so it's a huge part of our economy. And so it is
Yeah.
super important to our fisheries are a big part of that. And a lot of people come to Montana to fish. So it's something that it engages people because even if they're not, or even if they're not involved in fishing or the fishing industry, they do live in the same town as everybody else who might, or other people who might be engaged in fishing. And so if fishing goes away, the town dies too. And so if agriculture goes away, the town dies too. And so there's more and more
Huh.
recognition of that, even though there a lot of times they are butting heads with each other as far as
Yeah.
the fishing industry goes and agriculture. But overall, it's not. There's a lot more cooperation and a lot more to be had through cooperation than there is over finger pointing and yelling back and forth. So
Good to hear. All right, as we're closing things out, what's your favorite shore lunch when you go fishing for a day?
my favorite what?
Shore lunch.
Door lunch?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll think this is dumb, but like I have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every day in the summertime.
There you
That's all
go.
I eat.
Love them.
So
Love them. It's
it,
the best thing. It really is.
it, the reason for it is I don't know, particularly when we're out working, if my lunchbox is going to sit in the sun all day or if it's going to be packed away
Uh,
nice, and so I don't have to worry about my meat sandwich going bad or whatever with peanut butter and jelly. So I eat that almost every day. So I don't have even when we go
you
fishing,
don't
I
have
do the
anything
same.
fancy.
No,
You
I
ever
don't.
try a grilled peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
I have not tried that.
Dude, that put on some sourdough bread. That's really good.
Really?
Yeah, but of course you got to take a stove and some butter with you. But
Right.
it's really
Yeah.
good, particularly it's a little cold outside. Warm that PB and J up a little bit.
Oh yeah, that
All
sounds
right.
good.
Any great places to eat at the end of the day? Place to get a drink, something to eat at the end of the day around the Big Hole area.
Yeah, I mean, there's like I said, the Big Hole's pretty rural, and there's not a lot of stuff there. My favorite place to go is the H Bar J Bar in Wise River. They have a really good burger, and
What's the name of it?
H Bar J. So
H
like
Bar
it's
J. Okay.
an H with a bar and then a J.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a
Yep.
brand, right?
Yeah, it's a brand. Exactly. Yep. 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 They have a really good
Oh,
burger
that's
there.
cool.
So yeah.
They got burgers in there. There you go, folks.
Yep.
Jim, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, I appreciate all the work you're doing out there for all of us. Man, fantastic. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can reach me. The best way is, I'm around a lot this time of year, so you can reach me by phone, 406-533-8451, or email to Jim Olsen, Olsen at mt.gov. So,
Okay, there you go, folks. If you got some questions, give Jim a call. And hey, thanks everybody. Thanks you for listening. And be sure to check out the Destination Angler website, our Instagram and Facebook pages. We'll be posting some great pictures that we're going to get from Jim. Maybe some of those fly picks he was talking about, those home tide ones. I don't know. We'll see what he sends me. And some pictures of the area, some of those big fish that he's seeing from time to time. You can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shaig@destinationanglerpodcast.com. If you like the show, do me a little favor and share that with a buddy. As always, our music is by our Brothers Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.